So this is a bit on the fly, and this was actually a presentation that I gave at the World Conservation Congress, and I don't even remember what year it was, but a number of years ago, to introduce folks to the human dimensions of LSMPAs. So it's certainly appropriate for this purpose. So let's just jump in. The term human dimensions, what do we mean by that? So the term actually emerged largely from the wildlife and land management traditions in the United States and later the global environmental change community. And initially, the focus was largely on research that provided practical insights and recommendations for managers and policymakers. Human dimensions today has become a much broader term, very broadly applied, and it loosely refers to the set of social, economic, cultural, political, and institutional considerations related to conservation or resource management. You can think of these as the people-oriented factors. And from a practical perspective, anyone involved in natural resource conservation or management deals with human dimensions as an integral part of your work. And so the moment a discussion begins about whether, how, and where to designate a large-scale MPA, the realm of human dimensions has been entered. And so from a scientific perspective, scholars across many social science disciplines, including anthropology, geography, political science, sociology, economics, legal studies, psychology, etc., the list goes on, we all contribute to a large and wide body of research on the human dimensions of natural resources. But specifically in marine protected areas, there's also a long history of research and experience with smaller coastal MPAs that has illuminated the importance of key human dimensions issues that can greatly influence the outcomes of MPAs. And these include, just to name a few, the need to tailor the design and implementation of MPAs to the social, cultural, and historical context, in addition to the biological and physical contexts in which they are located. Secondly, the importance of minimizing negative social and economic impacts and maximizing positive impacts to improve the likelihood of social acceptance and political will. And third, the importance of employing and using transparent, equitable, and participatory planning processes. Again, these improve the likelihood that the MPA will be perceived as legitimate and perceived as equitable and just, and increase the likelihood of success. And so it's now widely understood that planning, implementing, and managing smaller coastal MPAs requires that equal attention be paid to biological and oceanographic issues and these human dimensions issues. Most of what we know about the human dimensions of MPAs has come from research and experience with smaller MPAs that are closer to shore and closer to populated urban centers. In 2008, the average size of MPAs was 544 square kilometers. Large-scale MPAs are more than 200 times that size. And so in part, because of their extensive size, many LSMPAs are remote. They encompass offshore and open ocean areas. And this unique geography means that their human dimensions, although equally important, might actually be a bit different from those in smaller MPAs in a number of ways. And I'm going to talk about those distinctions. The first distinction is a conceptual one, the way we think about them. So the geographic remoteness of LSMPAs sometimes can contribute to a conceptual distinction where LSMPAs are sometimes imagined or represented as unpeopled wilderness areas, though certainly not always. Some have struggled to see the importance of these people-oriented factors, right? The human dimension factors for spaces where there are no people, quote unquote. Although I think that this conceptualization is changing in part due to the work of you all and social scientists who are starting to study these issues. I would argue that this conceptual distinction has meant that human dimensions consideration have not been mainstreamed for LSMPAs the way that they have for smaller coastal MPAs. Of course, these human dimensions issues are not irrelevant, though, or non-existent. We think they're simply different. So the extension of LSMPAs into deeper waters and more remote locations means that their meaning and value for diverse groups is maybe not as visible or as easily understood. And it might not be based on physical use or presence. So trips to remote LSMPAs like the Marianas Trench Marine National Monument, and certainly trips to Papahanaumokuakea, we know they may be infrequent and really expensive, but these spaces and the ability to make those trips are of immense cultural value to local residents. Okay. Their size and remoteness also, and here is King Sam, also pose unprecedented governance challenges. One of these is the question of who should be part of LSMPA decision-making and how to effectively engage potentially large numbers of geographically dispersed stakeholders. And another issue is how to adequately monitor and enforce such large and remote spaces. We see these challenges that we've identified as human dimensions challenges certainly coming up in the survey as ongoing challenges. Relative to conventional MPAs, we think the politics of LSMPAs tend to be higher profile and higher level. They intersect with national, bilateral, and global politics, policies, and agendas in ways that smaller coastal MPAs simply don't. Smaller coastal MPAs don't typically attract the attention of world leaders like President Tommy Remengesau or Senator John McCain. And finally, large-scale MPAs differ from smaller MPAs in the type, the scope, and the reach of their social, political, cultural, and economic outcomes. Instead of impacting or only impacting particular communities, the outcomes of LSMPAs can affect entire nations and even relationships between countries. And so this is just an introduction to what we mean by human dimensions issues and how they might be different in large-scale MPAs. A growing number of social scientists, managers, NGOs, and donors are recognizing the unique human dimensions of LSMPAs, and we've been calling for a distinct social science research agenda on LSMPAs and management guidelines and other tools that are specifically tailored to fit the unique needs of LSMPAs have emerged, like the IUCN guidelines that John Day and Nia Lewis and others, many others actually in this meeting have produced. And so it's really great to see the growth in this field, given the unique questions, challenges, and opportunities that LSMPAs pose for the human dimensions side of things. I'll go ahead and end there. I think that was